It's always fun to create different things. Ideally, I think a project should be accessible and use what you have. One of the things I have in abundance are natural die scraps. You know those pieces. Some are decent sized and should definitely be saved. Some are quite small and most people would probably throw them away. But I have a hard time throwing anything away which might be useful at some point, so I save mine. I have one bag for linen scraps and one bag for cotton scraps. And the cotton bin is a bit more appealing in terms of color at this point, so let's focus on that. I enjoy dyeing fabrics with plants, and I mainly sew quilts as well as some smaller projects with the stuff I dye. Now, scraps I think are a great opportunity to test out ideas, some quilting concepts or other things. And lately I've been doing a bit of bookbinding. Now, if you haven't done any bookbinding, it's actually quite similar to sewing, but also different at the same time. It's very easy to get started. All you really need is some paper, a needle and thread. And you can use fancy equipment. I have some really nice things, but you don't really need anything at all. And one thing I've been wanting to play with more is making different types of covers. And did you know you can easily make your own book covers by making wheat paste using flour and water, I know, and whatever fabric and paperboard you have on hand. So far I've covered my book boards with plain dyed indigo fabric and some avocado fabric, but I've been thinking this would be a great canvas for some scrap designs as well. Now, when I first start here, I'm not exactly sure what I'm looking for. I have some blocks sewn together. Those were leftovers from my most recent quilt, the indigo star quilt I made a couple of months back, and I used blocks as a border, which I thought was kind of fun and broke up the flow of the design a bit, so I have some of that here. So I'm testing out some ideas, but I realized I should really iron everything properly before I go any further. Ironing is one of those things which I often resist doing because it's just such an annoying step, but then it does make everything so much nicer and easier to work with. So I've got a decent amount of scraps, and I'm still thinking about what I want to do here. One thing I've learned when it comes to quilt designs is you have two main options. Well, I'm sure you have lots of options, but I usually either sew squares sewn together or triangles sewn together. And if you create triangles, you have so many design options. The easiest way I've found to create triangles, or one of the easiest ways, is to put up squares together and then mark a diagonal, and then you sew on each side of the diagonal for two sets of triangles, and you cut it in the middle. And this is where it would be useful to have an iron ready, but when I don't, I can just flatten it with my hand and it does a pretty good job as well. So there we've got a pinwheel star, which is kind of fun, but yeah, I'm not feeling that. A middle square if you'd like, here, and this got me thinking of another quilt I made a while back when I used the technique where you sew a corner of each piece of, like I used natural fabric, and creating a little section on each square then in a different color. And then when combined in sets of 4, you get a diamond effect, which I thought was really neat. It looks more complicated than it is. But anyway, I thought it would be fun to use the same effect here and add a blue corner on these squares. And I like small projects, but sewing tiny things is sometimes a bit finicky. The thread can get bunched up, and this is really as small as I want to go, without having too many issues. So now I can cut off the little corner and of course trim the pieces square. Perhaps the most tedious part of making quilting designs is constant trimming and squaring up, but you really can't skip it, or else your designs won't come out very crisp. It's all in these little details and, being thorough. So now when I combine my pieces, I get a blue center. So now I'm combining my squares together. And of course the goal is to get perfect seams to come together. And do you think I got that? No, not precisely, but that's okay. They're pretty good. Now I could stop here, but I was reminded of something I saw the other day, where this diamond type of design was used, but the outer color was more of a diamond border, which I liked, so I figured I could do the same technique again towards the outside, and we'll see what we'll get. Okay, so my border here, you can see it was cut on the edges. It's not a full border, which I should have anticipated, but sometimes you don't see things until after the fact. But that's fine. That's why this is a test piece to do something fun with, a way to explore designs you might want to take on a larger scale in the future. And the thing, sometimes you do test pieces like this, but then you don't know what to do with the test pieces. So that's why I like having ideas for smaller projects. So what I really wanted to do all along here was create a book cover. And I need some material to connect the two pieces together, so just marking out kind of the dimensions. These colors here remind me of colors you see at dusk, like shadows and kind of muted colors. I love this palette. It is muted and the blue kind of pops, but it's colorful at the same time. I call these dusk colors. So next step is using these for something practical, but I figured we'll go into making a book next time, which is really fun and useful in the sense that everyone, or at least I, always need a new notebook. One thing I usually find interesting is how people tend to stick within one hobby. So if you are a quilter, you're usually not also a bookbinder, or if you are a woodworker, you're usually not a sewer. This is not always the case, but it's often the case, which is why I think it's kind of interesting at times to kind of combine different hobbies. So putting a quilt design on a book, for example, is just something fun and a little bit unexpected. Let me know if you have any things where you like to use your scrap projects, anything unexpected or different, or just in general. Thanks so much for watching, and please make sure to subscribe for more content of creative projects that I do in my little shop here. Bye.